It's January 2021. We are at the start of the tax return season. And could somebody be filing a tax return using your information, a fraudulent tax return? Possibly. But there is one simple tool that you can use, and it's free to protect yourself from tax return identity theft. What is it? Stay tuned to find out. Welcome to the Carrie Kursky Show, your partner in the fight against identity theft, fraud, and cyber threats. I'm your host, Carrie Kursky. Tax return identity theft is when someone uses your identity, primarily your name and social security number, to file a tax return to get a refund. But what if you normally don't get a refund? You might think, why would they use my name? They're not going to be able to get any money. That's because they don't use your income figures. They don't use your numbers. They use made up numbers that they've calculated a formula of which will give them the maximum amount of return with the least chance of raising a red flag for an audit. So they have this down to a science. All they need is your name and your social. And it's not just adults. We've seen a trend increasing for the past maybe 3, maybe 4 years where dependents' identities are being used. Why? Well, the first time we saw it was involving college students. And that's because with all the college tax credits that people were eligible for, the bad guys would submit a tax return using the identity of a college student. The next thing we started seeing with them using dependents information is because of the pandemic, because of COVID. Once the first stimulus payments went out, people had not filed their tax returns. And remember, in 2020, the tax deadline was moved. So it wasn't in April, it was moved to later in the fall. Because of this, it gave people more time to file the returns. Well, the longer it takes you to submit that return, the better the chance of a bad guy to put one in before you get the chance. So what the bad guys were doing, they knew that the more dependents you have, the more money you received from the stimulus payments. So they would file a return and they would just add on dependents, which would be your dependents, so they could get more money. How do we know this happened? Well, around October and November, we started getting calls from people saying, we tried to file our tax return and it kicked back saying that they had already received a return with our dependents information on it. So it's not just you, the primary taxpayer, it could also be your dependents whose information is used. But the good news, there is one simple tool that you can use to protect yourself. Before we get into that, let's talk about what some of the negative impacts are to you if somebody files a tax return. Like we said before, they do it so that they can get a refund payment. Now, sometimes people get confused, and if you're supposed to get a refund payment, you're going to think, oh, the bad guy stole mine. No, they're two separate buckets, okay? So even though someone filed a fake tax return using your information, if you are entitled to receive a refund, you will get that refund. The difference is it might be delayed. So if you go to file your return and you get a notification back from the IRS saying that they already received one with your information, they're going to have you file an identity theft affidavit and maybe some additional paperwork because they want to prove that you are you, and you have to file your return by paper. You can't e-file, no electronic filing. And then the IRS is going to look at both of them, figure out which one is the real one. And then once they determine that yours is legitimate, then you will get your refund payment. I've seen this anywhere from 6 months to a couple of years is how long your refund payment can be delayed. Now, if you owe the IRS money, there's no delay. They still want their money. Now, it's all it's going to do is determine how you submit your return. So if you normally e-file, if you're a victim of tax return identity theft, you may have to file by paper. So that means printing everything out, putting it in an envelope, and mailing it off to the IRS. So it can cause delays, especially if you wait till the last minute to file, and now you have to do it by mail. So this could cause problems. So let's talk about how to protect yourself. The IRS years ago created something called an IPIN, an identity protection PIN number. This was created to protect you from tax return identity theft, but it was more of an after the fact type of a protection. They figured if someone had already been a victim, in order to protect them from being a victim again and again, they came up with this IPIN program. So the only way to get an IPIN is if you were a victim of tax return identity theft. Then they launched a pilot program or beta program. Any resident of Florida, Georgia, and DC could apply for an IPIN number. Why those three? Because those were the areas with the largest amount of tax return identity theft at the time. So they were trying to prevent and minimize as much in those three hotspots as they could. Over the years, they've expanded it out to more states, but not every state was eligible. So if you did not live in one of the kind of pre-approved states or eligible states, the only way you could apply for an IPIN was if you were a victim of tax return identity theft. Kind of reactive. Should be you apply for it first to prevent it, but again, it wasn't eligible. Well, in December of 2020, the IRS made an announcement that starting in 2021, all taxpayers or all eligible taxpayers can apply for and request an IPIN number. Doesn't matter what state you're in, doesn't matter if you've already been a victim of this or not. You can apply for an IPIN number. Let's talk a little bit about what does an IPIN number actually do? Well, the IPIN number, it is a number that is assigned to you. It's a 6-digit number. It is assigned to you by the IRS, and then you have to put that number on your tax return in order for the IRS to accept it. If they receive a return and your IPIN number is not on it, it's automatically rejected. So it's a great, simple, easy tool. Now, where do you put the PIN number? Typically on the tax return form, it's down at the bottom near the signature, or if you're using like a TurboTax or one of these programs that'll ask you for it towards the end of the process before you actually submit the return, it's going to ask you for that. Now, this is different from the PIN number that you use to track your return or track your refund. This is separate. It is called an IPIN. So there's a tracking PIN and the IPIN. So don't get those confused. How do you get your IPIN number? Well, we'll talk about the steps to set it up. Once you've established that you have an IPIN number, every year the IRS will mail you a new one for that tax year. So in December of 2020, people who had already requested an IPIN number started receiving their PIN number for 2020. So it's usually November, December, or sometimes into January is when they mail those out to you. So keep an eye on your mail. If you get something from the IRS, don't panic. It's just your IPIN number. And make sure that you share that number with whomever is preparing your taxes, your accountant, CPA, tax preparer, whatever the case might be. Make sure that they have it, because if they submit your return without it, it's going to be rejected. So let's talk about how to actually get the IPIN. Now, for those of you that are listening to this podcast, there are some of the things. What I'm doing right now is I'm actually going to go to the website. So if you're on the video, hang with me and I'll show you kind of the website and what it looks like. If you're listening to the podcast, don't worry about it. You don't have to click on video. I'm going to put all the links in the show notes, and I'm going to explain what we're doing as we're going through this. I just want to make sure that we have it covered for whether you're listening to this or whether you're watching it on my YouTube channel. So I'm going to pull up the IRS website. Now, the IRS website is irs.gov, V like in Victor. If you're doing an internet search for IRS website and you come to irs.com, you're on the wrong one. It's irs.gov. Okay, now we're on the website. There's a whole bunch of information when you go to their homepage, and they talk about different things: view your account, get your tax record, make a payment. And they have some forms and instructions, and then articles. It's too difficult to try to read through all this stuff. So the easiest thing to do is when you get to the IRS homepage, there's a search box in the top right corner of the page. You're going to type in IPIN. Okay, it's 2 words, IP space PIN. You're going to type that in. And when I'm saying IP, that stands for Identity Protection PIN. And then we're going to search. And then you're going to have all different results. It looks like there's 58 matching items that come up based on the words IPIN. So the first one recommended by the IRS, it says get an identity protection PIN number. If you click on that link, it's going to take you through the process. But before we do that, I just want to show you a couple other things on here. The other thing that you see, it says retrieve your identity protection PIN number. If for some reason you don't get it in the mail, or maybe if you've misplaced it and you need to get or recover your IPIN number, you can do that online. You do have to validate your identity, and you do have to log into your account, which we'll talk about in a second. But there is another option to get your PIN number in case you lose that piece of paper. And then it has other information on here. There is a form. There are some people that maybe they cannot request one online and they want to do it by mail or by using a specific form. This talks about that form and who's eligible to use it. And then it has frequently frequently asked questions. So if you have questions or concerns, so we are going to go back to get an identity protection PIN. So I'm going to click on the link. Right at the top, it tells you eligibility. In the past, it used to tell you the list of states of whose residents were eligible. Now it says, if you're a confirmed victim of identity theft, or starting in 2021, you may voluntarily opt in the IPIN program as a proactive way to protect yourself. Anyone can do this, any eligible taxpayer. If you're a victim of identity theft, they're going to mail you a letter that contains your PIN number, or if you're volunteering to opt in, you can use their Get an IPIN tool, which is online. When you do get your PIN number online, it'll tell you what tax year that's for. So just pay attention to that. And the IPIN tool is genuinely unavailable mid-November through mid-January. But I'm going to go back up here on the website. Again, we're on the irs.gov website, and we searched by IPIN, and we came up to the search results, and we selected Get an IPIN. Now we're on that website, that page, and I'm going to click on the button. It's a blue button that says Get an IPIN. So you click on that, and now you have two options. You can sign up if you do not have an account with the IRS, or if you already have an account, then you can just log in. If you're not sure if you have an account or not, you can try to set one up. If you have one, it's going to tell you you already have one. Or you could try to log in using username and password that you already have. But just be careful with using that method to determine if you have an account or not, because if you enter the wrong information too many times, then you might be blocked from using the online system. Try to set up an account. If you already have one, it's going to tell you. I cannot proceed any further because I would have to enter in sensitive information or use fictitious information, which I'm not doing because I'm entering fraudulent information on a government website. So this is about as far as we can go with the visual here. And if you're listening to the podcast, you don't have to worry about it, but just wanted you to be aware that we're not going to go any further. So again, you don't have to watch the video. It's available for you if you want to. So when you go through the sign up process, it's a two-step process. The first thing you do is you set up the online account with the IRS. So they're going to ask you to enter name, address, date of birth, social. For ID verification, they're going to want you to provide a mobile phone number. There are a couple of things they're going to ask you for. One might be your mortgage account number, or your credit card number, or your bank account number. But the good news is before you start the process of setting up the IRS online account, it's going to tell you you need to have these things available before you proceed. Once you've passed that screening process and you've confirmed that you've set up your online account, then you log into your online account, and then you can select to get an IPIN. It's a two-step process. You have to set up the online account with the IRS first, and then once the account is established, you log into that account, and then you can choose to opt in to the IPIN program. Once you do that, at the end, you're going to have a document with your IPIN number on it. And pay attention to what year it is. It's a real simple process. It takes a little bit of time. I would say give yourself anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes to, from start to finish to be able to do it. Do it somewhere you have access to your financial records, because they're going to ask you some of these questions. And do it somewhere where you have your mobile phone handy, because they more than likely are going to text you a code that you then have to enter into the system. So make sure you have those things with you, but they'll tell you everything that you have to do before you start the process. Record your username and password. Record it in a secure location. That way you can use it to log back in. If you already have an IPIN number from the IRS, you should have received your letter with your 2020 tax year PIN number. I know in my family, we started getting them in December. Some people get them in November. Some people, you might be getting them in January. So again, the time frame, mid-November to mid-January, is when you should expect to receive that letter. If you didn't get the letter, log in to your IRS account, enter your username and password, and you should be able to use the retrieve your IPIN. And that's about it. Pretty simple. If you haven't done it, go ahead and do it. It's the easiest way to protect yourself from tax return identity theft. Stops the bad guys from filing fraudulent tax returns using your information. That's it for this episode. Tune in next week. We'll have some more great information about tips and tricks to protect yourself from identity theft, fraud, and cyber threats. Stay safe.